morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Boy, do I have a great show for you today. Coming up in 30 minutes, former Arizona running back Brian Stevenson is going to join the show. I cannot wait to talk with him about all the latest in college football's time in Arizona, the running back position, all that good stuff. But do want to start with a Monday night football game. I don't know where you guys were when you were watching this game. I know where I was. And more importantly, I knew where I was the last time I saw an incredible Monday night football game in the NFL was. Now it was between the Rams and the Chiefs. Now, all I could hear for this past week were different pundits, different sports talk show hosts downplaying the significance of this game. Everyone was talking about how, the stakes weren't nearly as high as that game. It was still a great game, but the stakes weren't as high, right? The Rams beat the Chiefs in that incredible offensive showing, 54-51 at the Coliseum. But the reality is, this game, I'm not saying that it was the greatest Monday night football game ever. It's obviously the greatest Monday night football game that I've seen, given the stakes. Because given the stakes, you look at this team and the Rams and the Chiefs, listen, both of those teams were already solidified in the playoffs. This was just a preview of the Super Bowl. This wasn't about, okay, if one of these teams loses, then this could cost them the season. They're going to miss the postseason. No. People were just jacking up this game because this was a potential Super Bowl preview. Best team in the AFC comes to the Coliseum to play the best team in the NFC. But the Rams and the Browns and the Ravens on Monday night, the stakes were significantly higher. The Browns, this is a team that was coming off their most dominant win in perhaps the last 18 years over the Tennessee Titans, a thrashing, right? This team was seeking some legitimacy, some validation, some relevance in the NFL. They wanted to cement their place in the NFL, and they didn't want to be looked upon anymore as this sorry franchise. That's the reality. This was a moribund franchise that has currently the longest active streak of missing the postseason. 18 consecutive years they've missed the playoffs. They didn't want that stigma placed to them. So you're factoring in, this is a divisional game, a chance to close the gap between themselves and the Steelers with a final regular season game at home against Pittsburgh. This was a monster game for the Browns, and they came up a little bit short because the team that they were facing in the Baltimore Ravens was that much more desperate. They needed to have this win to make the postseason, to keep their playoff hopes alive. They had to secure the W. So you look at the stakes. The stakes of this game were significantly higher for the Baltimore Ravens. And the Ravens probably had to endure and traverse the most arduous road this year for an NFL team. You could argue. The Patriots certainly had a difficult one, but I would argue it was the Ravens. And Lamar Jackson, your starting quarterback, misses a game at a key stretch in your regular season. And listen, I've seen all the Marvel movies. I've seen all the DC movies. I love Superman just as much as the next person. Lamar Jackson was Superman on Monday night. This is like, if there are any Game of Thrones fans, the end of season 5, Jon Snow gets stabbed in the heart by his own members of the Night's Watch. And all you can think about the entire off season and the entire summer is this guy alive? And he all of a sudden emerges and is alive to start the next season. And everyone's pumped. They're excited. This is getting everyone super jazzed about the rest of the season, the rest of that season of Game of Thrones, right? And Lamar Jackson emerges out of the locker room. Believe me, other guys watching know the same Waddle that I saw is the same Waddle that I might go to if I have to do something else. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't cramps. I believe him. But we all know that's a different Waddle. That's a different Waddle. Believe me, we know that Waddle. But regardless, he emerges out of the locker room almost like Aslan in Narnia, where you think Aslan's dead, and then he all of a sudden reemerges out of the broken pieces of cement, and he defeats the White Witch. This was an unbelievable. Not only did Lamar Jackson have to return to the field, he returned to the field on a 4th and 5. Superman gets called upon. He doesn't just show up wearing his cape out and his insignia out for everyone to see. You need to call upon Superman. And the reality is the Ravens, they didn't know if Lamar Jackson was going to emerge, was going to return. So as far as they were concerned, they were putting their playoff hopes, they were entrusting their playoff hopes on the arms and legs of Trace McSorley, a second-year player out of Penn State. The Ravens' season could have nearly been defined by one play by Trace McSorley, and it was completely fortuitous that he injured his leg, had to be removed, and because he was an injured player, if you injure yourself on a play, the NFL stipulates you have to sit out the next play. So who emerges and who gets pulled up? Your star reigning MVP quarterback, Lamar Jackson. It was just perfectly fitting for him to re-enter the game, And so now you're thinking, you're watching this game, Lamar Jackson comes, connects on a 4th and 5, right? He's cold. He hasn't played the entire fourth quarter. This is his first snap in the fourth quarter, and he hits Marquise Brown for a 40-something yard touchdown to put the Ravens up by a touchdown with a little under 2 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. So now you're thinking, well, it was a great game, an incredible finish. Time to go to bed. And to credit Baker Mayfield, he leads the Browns down, marches 4 plays, 75 yards in 47 seconds, ties the ball game up, gives the ball right back to Lamar Jackson. You're thinking, well, this is going to overtime. I mean, there could be time for Lamar Jackson. We're not sure. They do have the best field goal kicker in the NFL history, arguably, in Justin Tucker in their back pocket. And with one timeout, 1 minute to go, Lamar Jackson connects on 4 straight passes, sets up Justin Tucker for a 55-yard field goal, and they win the game with 2 points. And to make matters worse, to add insult to injury, my roommate bet on the spread. The spread was +3 Browns. The spread was +3 Browns, and with 2 seconds left, they committed a safety and lost by 5. Everything about that matchup was just unbelievable. And the reality is, Lamar Jackson is the most electrifying, magnetic, and dynamic player I've ever seen. He was fantastic. 99.5 QBR, best QBR this year. He actually eclipsed that QBR twice last year during his MVP season, but 11 for 17, 160-something passing yards, 1 touchdown, 2 rushing touchdowns on 9 carries, 124 rushing yards for Lamar Jackson. Think about this. Think about how difficult it is for a running back to accumulate yards in the NFL. And it took him to reach 100 yards. It took him 9 carries to reach 124 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. He's just unbelievable. And then from the Browns' perspective, listen, Baker finally played like the number 1 overall pick. He had his best game as a professional. He looked confident. He was a leader. He displayed poise and calm on the sidelines. Even when he was in the huddle on the field, they just came up short because the guy he was going up against was having a magical night. And there was just nothing you could do about it. And it almost felt like the last team to get the possession was going to win the ball game. And the Ravens, that was unbelievable. Unbelievable finish. I think, again, I would still give the edge towards the Rams-Chiefs game as my all-time favorite and greatest Monday Night Football game ever. But I'd be lying if I said that the stakes of that game And the magnitude was greater than the magnitude of this game because the reality is it wasn't. That wasn't. So fantastic game and a fantastic finish. Cannot wait to see what the Ravens do next. Okay. Quickly, one more topic, couple more topics. And again, in about 15, 20 minutes, former Arizona running back Brian Stevenson will join the show. Cannot wait to have him on. And the Milwaukee Bucks and their fan base no longer have to wait to see what Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to do because he signs the supermax contract extension to remain in Milwaukee, 5 years, $228.2 million, the largest NBA contract. He does have an opt-out after the fourth year. And first of all, let me just say I'm happy for Giannis that he collected the bag. I'm happy that he has his money. I'm glad that he can support everyone in his life that he would wish to support, because we know the type of tumultuous road and the obstacles he had to overcome in Greece. And so there are two main reasons why this is so massive of a contract. First of all, what this does is it sets a new precedent moving forward, and in a way undoes a recent trend in the NBA when it comes to NBA stars, which is that the Supermax can, in fact, incentivize players to stay. Damian Lillard is the only other player that we've seen that was willing to stay and remain in that small market. Most of the time, LeBron James, he defined player movement. He set in motion player empowerment, player movement in the NBA. With his decision 10 years ago, he was in the exact same position, was reaching the same crossroads as Giannis was this year. And he decided with the decision to leave his hometown and the team that drafted him, Cleveland Cavaliers, to go take his talents to Miami. We all remember South Beach. And there are a lot of other players that have followed in those footsteps. Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, Anthony Davis, had he not been traded, was going to opt out in free agency. Even to a lesser degree, Carmelo Anthony with the Denver Nuggets. That's the trend. There haven't been too many players in NBA history where if you are a mega star, you stay in that small market. You just don't see it. You don't see it. Again, Damian Lillard is probably the most recent example of a guy that did opt to stay. And so when you have a guy in Giannis who's a back-to-back league MVP, a guy that has led the Bucks to the best overall record the past 2 seasons, it is imperative that you entice this guy to stay. This is a Bucks team that hasn't reached the NBA Finals or won an NBA championship since 1974 when they had the great Lou Alcindor, now commonly referred to as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And first of all, it was reported that by Bleacher Report that Giannis, that there were certain stipulations and certain things that Giannis needed to see from the Bucks before he was going to sign. There were different teams that he was potentially considering, some teams in Texas, some teams in Florida, probably the Miami Heat and the Dallas Mavericks, which I'll touch on in a brief moment. And the big factor, first of all, was the commitment from Mark Lazary and Wes Edens and the ownership group, the rest of the ownership group for the Milwaukee Bucks, that they were going to pay for championship players. They were willing to spend in the luxury tax to acquire players. Obviously, they made the big offseason acquisition of Drew Holiday, but Giannis needed to see that this ownership group and that this franchise had a clear path, had a clear direction, a clear vision moving forward to surround him with a championship team. And you think back to the all-time greats who played for the Milwaukee Bucks. Obviously, the first couple guys you think of are Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Oscar Robertson, but there aren't too many great players that remained in Milwaukee for the the majority of their prime, the majority of their career. There are really only a few guys. Glenn Robinson did it, Bob Dindrich, and Sidney Moncrief. Those are the three guys. Those are the longest tenured guys that are notable with the Milwaukee Bucks franchise. So now you have a guy in Giannis who will join that list. Will join that list of players that will have remained in a Bucks uniform for a long duration of their career. Now, again, it's possible he could be traded, but he's been there already 7 years, which is already creeping up for the longest tenured players in the Bucks history. And so that's one perspective, that it sets a new precedent that, hey, yes, the supermax incentive can work. And by the way, I've said this before, players are much more intelligent today than they were several years ago. And it's not a literal lack of intelligence. It's more awareness, and it's more acutely in tuned with all of their options. There's so many more people to consult. There's so many more things to consider. Does your franchise have a direction, have a vision moving forward? What's their financial situation? What are the contract situations of the players? What does their track record say? What are the other options if the player opts to not sign the supermax and maybe sign a 2-year deal, which was something that Giannis was considering, signing a 2-year deal, max extension, and then signing a 4-year max extension somewhere else. So there are many more factors that are at play than there used to be. So that's the first huge reason for this decision. The second huge reason is from a basketball competitive standpoint. Listen, Giannis, this shows that Giannis had to look himself in the mirror and evaluate his play. And the reality is this team has been good enough to reach the NBA Finals and to get out of the Eastern Conference had he personally played better, especially the last 2 years. You look at last season in particular, averaged 30 points in the regular season, 11 rebounds, 5.6 assists, was efficient 56% from the floor, a career best 30% from the three-point line in the regular season. And come postseason time, now again, I understand it was in the bubble, but the reality is come postseason time, that 30-point average dropped all the way to 23 points per game, maybe 22 points per game. So the impact of his numbers weren't the same. And then 2 years ago, when he won his first league MVP, he averaged 27.5 points a game. He shot the ball an unbelievable clip, 58% from the floor. And in that postseason, he averaged 22 points a game on 44.5% from the floor and lost 4 straight games to Kawhi Leonard and the Raptors in the Eastern Conference Finals. So again, what we're seeing is he had to look himself in the mirror and say, okay, I need to be better. I have the support. I have the support we need. If I personally take ownership over my level of play and address the areas that need the most addressing, we will overcome. We will achieve. And then it also diminishes the championship chances of some of the other teams that he, in essence, kind of spurned. The Warriors were making a play at him. They were trying to create enough cap space and maybe some trade assets to acquire Giannis. Miami Heat, as I mentioned, had been in the works, had been talking to his representatives kind of under the radar. And same thing with Dallas. No state income tax in Dallas and in Florida. So from a basketball competitive standpoint, you maintain some of this power balance and this balance of power in the Eastern Conference. It's nice to see that not all the players from the East are fleeing to the West, and that you retain some competitive balance in the Eastern Conference. That's what's important. That's what's really important. And then, listen, he's just a really likable guy. I think that anyone that watches Giannis play, anyone that watches the Bucks, it's hard not to root for him. There's really nothing, there's no reason to feel any type of vitriol, any type of negative way about Giannis. There's nothing that he does that wouldn't draw in a basketball fan. He's ultra competitive. He's fiercely loyal. He's committed to his teammates. He plays extremely hard. And he's the Greek freak. He is a freak of nature. He's 6'11" with like a 7'10" wingspan. He can jump out of the gym. He can block shots. He's extremely versatile. He can run the point at 6'11". This is the ultimate package. And if he just improves some little aspects of his game, tweaks a little bit of his shot, then you're going to be looking at the next. You know what? There is no next. There's never been a player like him. LeBron James is 6'8", 6'9", much more built, much more compact. Giannis is an enigma. We've never seen a guy like him before. So I'm really happy for him. He's an extremely likable guy. I'm happy for the state of Wisconsin, my second home state. Happy for the city of Milwaukee. Happy for the Bucks fans because I know many of them. So this is a major coup for the Bucks, and this is huge for the NBA moving forward. That hey, this supermax incentive can work. Can work. You're watching Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, and on YouTube. Every Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. One more topic, and then, as I've promised, super excited, Brian Stevenson, former Arizona running back, is going to join the show very, very shortly. So make sure to stick around. Hashtag JMalk, hashtag Morning Joe, comment, like, subscribe, whatever, all that jazz to all the content here. So, final topic I want to shift to, the College Football Playoff Committee released their latest top 25 rankings, their penultimate top 25 rankings. And this was very telling. And what we saw is that USC and Cincinnati aren't going to make the college football playoff. That's what we found out. Because what the committee is saying, this was a referendum against the Pac-12. Unfortunately for Cincinnati, they just don't have the built-in cachet and the built-in equity to garner more consideration. That's the reality. They haven't garnered enough consideration as of yet. Now, USC, listen, I've said this before. There's never been a year in college football where optics and style points have mattered more than this year. It's a truncated season. We've never had a season in which the manner in which you win football games is going to be valued any higher. We've never seen it. You look at the FPI, which is the Football Power Index, which measures team strengths and represents the average number of points above or below average this team is compared with the rest of the country. So it measures the team's strengths. You look at the top 10 teams right now, and according to the College Football Playoff Committee, Alabama was 1, Notre Dame 2, Clemson 3, Ohio State 4, Texas A&M 5, Iowa State 6, Florida dropped 1 spot to 7, Georgia at 8, and then you have Cincinnati at 9, Oklahoma rounds at the top 10 at 10, and then we see USC come in at number 13. And you look at the average margin of victories and the FPI, and all these other teams have a greater FPI than USC and Cincinnati. I mean, Alabama's average margin of victory, 33 points. Ohio State average margin of victory, 23 points. Clemson's average margin of victory, 29 points. Notre Dame, 21. Even Oklahoma, average margin of victory, 21 points. Texas A&M was 14.5. But the reality is their degree of difficulty, their schedule is much more difficult. And you look at USC, and USC's average margin of victory is 10 points. And they barely won their first 2 games. They should have lost to Arizona State. They should have lost to Arizona. They easily should have lost. They could have lost to UCLA. So instead of looking at a 5-0 USC team, you're looking at a 2-3 USC team. So this is very telling. The committee told us that USC and Cincinnati will not make the college football playoff. There's one more ranking left. USC plays an unranked Oregon team who's already lost twice. So just be wary moving forward that don't be surprised if USC and Cincinnati don't make it. And unfortunately, Cincinnati, as I said, just doesn't have the built-in cachet or the built-in equity with the committee to garner that type of consideration. So it's a shame, but it is what it is. Once again, you're watching Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, and on YouTube Mondays and Wednesday mornings, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Thank you for joining Morning Joe, making J&J Media Network a part of your weekday morning plans. So now, joining me on the show, I am extremely excited to bring on former Arizona running back Brian Stevenson. Played in 1977 to 1979. Really exciting stuff. And Brian, as I bring you on to the show, first of all, thank you so much for joining me. You know, Brian, you joined you played football at a really interesting time. First of all, Arizona was part of the WAC conference in 77. They didn't switch till 78 into the Pac-10.
Right.
And not to mention, you grew up at a time when the NFL's popularity was burgeoning. And the running back position was a really coveted position back then. Jim Brown had just completed his tremendous run in the 60s. You had Earl Campbell in the 70s, Walter Payton, 3-time NFC leading rusher. And actually, the funny thing about Walter Payton is he should really get credit for coining the flu game, because he was the one that had flu-like symptoms against Minnesota when he rushed for 275 yards. Now, I'll admit I wasn't alive to see it, but he should get credit for that flu-like game.
Yeah.
And obviously O.J. Simpson came after. But so the running back position was a very coveted position back then. And so I'm curious, you know, you grew up at a time when that position was coveted. What was that experience like for you playing the running back position at Arizona? And how do you think that position has evolved and is valued today?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say, thanks, Jonah, for putting me on. I know we've talked about this for a bit, and so I'm very honored to be on the show with you. I think you're doing a really good job, and I see some bright future things for you. So keep it going. As opposed to your question about the running back position, yeah, back then, obviously, the running back position was a lot more important than it is today. I mean, today it's more the quarterback, wide receivers. They only use a running back if kind of was almost like window dressing. So it's a little bit more kind of in the back seat as it used to be. But actually, I mean, I actually kind of like it because, especially for somebody like me who wasn't very big, when I played back in the day. And I think now my skills will probably be a little bit better suited for some of the offenses because they kind of use those running backs more in space. They throw the ball to them a little bit more. They put them out in space. They don't put them up, in between the tackles. So I think my abilities probably would have been more suited better today than back then. But hey, you know what? I didn't do so bad, so there wasn't. It was okay.
And the other thing I would ask you is, obviously, you see the kind of money that other skills position players are making, right?
Yeah.
Quarterbacks, wide receivers. would you ever go back and kind of poke a younger Brian Stevenson on the shoulder and say, hey, man, are we sure we still want to go the route of running back? Did you ever consider playing a different position? And looking back on it now, would you have ever considered playing a different position?
Yeah, I now I think I probably would have been better suited wide receiver or something. I don't know. Again, the wide receivers are kind of getting more play these days than a running back. So I think that probably would have been at the top of my mind. But still at the same time, I think you see so many running backs today that are not, they're not very big. I mean, if you look at, or even wide receivers for that matter, you see Kansas City and they've got a couple of guys that are like, they may be my size, right? And they run about as fast as I did. So I think either way, whether it was a wide receiver or running back, I think those are the positions that I probably would have still coveted and be more involved with, as well as special teams. You've got a lot has evolved into the special teams where a lot of these guys are returning punts that are, again, they're not so big and they're not, they're fast and they're quick and they use them in space. So I think it probably wouldn't have changed much for me, but I think those are probably the two positions that I probably would have concentrated on the most. And yeah, the money, these days is it's really good. Although I don't think I would have made the NFL, but maybe with the money that it is now, I think I probably would have thought about it a little bit more.
Very true. Because I know it's super interesting. Just seeing some of these guys go back and they interview and they're like, hey, you know what? Running back position is a physical position. I don't know. Maybe I'd want to switch it up a little bit.
Yeah.
But
I wouldn't have gotten beat up so much. I think the game today is a little bit more, they're a little bit more nicer to quarterbacks and other people because of the rule changes. So, people are not pulling your leg and they're not trying to hit you over the head after you got tackled. So I think my body would have lasted a little bit better today than it would have been back then.
So let me stick with your alma mater, Arizona. They obviously just fired Kevin Sumlin.
Mm-hmm.
Had to buy him out at a steep price, Brian. $18.5 million to buy out this head coach. And listen, there are a lot of expectations because he did a great job at Houston and then Texas A&M, had a winning record everywhere he went.
Mm-hmm.
And then he arrived in Arizona and obviously underperformed. So I remember we were talking a little bit about this before it became official that he was going to be let go. But what did you think of the job that he did while he was there? And now that he's gone, how can Arizona kind of steer this tumultuous ship kind of out of this? And do you have any ideas about maybe some potential next head coaches that they could pursue or should pursue?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, at first, when they first hired someone, I thought it was actually a pretty good hire. Here's a guy who came from the Southeastern Conference and played with Coach Texas A&M. And I thought it was a good hire, but I think the thing that was an issue with him was that he didn't really have like a presence in the West Coast in terms of recruiting. And I don't think that his ties to the Southeastern Conference were such to where, they were attractive enough for those players to come to Arizona. So really, he had to concentrate on the California base. And unfortunately, he kind of ran into, USC, UCLA, Arizona State has Herm Edwards. So I think he ran into that. And so he was only kind of getting those second pickings. And really, Sumlin's his strength wasn't really defense; it was offense. And in this league, you got to have a good defense in order to stop people. So I think he was sort of doomed from the start. And I think after the loss that we had against Arizona State last week, I kind of figured that was going to happen. They were going to remove him. So now as far as new coaches. I know they've been talking to the candidates have been the coach over there, Boise State. I know Gus Malzahn from Auburn, who just lost his job. He might be an opportunity, but again, it's going to have to come down to a coach who has really strong ties in the California and West Coast areas, because if you don't have that, then you're not going to, you're just not going to make it. So, yeah.
And especially we're seeing the competition that is being shown just down the road in Tempe. I mean, Herm Edwards, the job that he's done to transform Arizona State, he's recruiting players extremely well, and he's making the pitch to these kids that, hey, listen, I played in the NFL, so you should come play for me. So it is going to be interesting. I would love to see Arizona improve their status. I think it would help the Pac-12 South tremendously, and just the overall Pac-12 as a whole. And speaking of the Pac-12 as a whole, again, the last four college football playoffs have basically been a referendum against the Pac-12.
Yeah.
And the Pac-10. And it wasn't that long ago, Brian, that this conference was viewed as an elite conference. Obviously, USC carried the mantle, and in those Pete Carroll, Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart days, this was a real powerhouse. There's no way around it. It was a perennial powerhouse. Obviously, a bit of that shine has rubbed off now. So I'm curious, what was the perception and the image of the Pac-10? I guess the Pac-10 when you were playing.
Yeah.
The Pac-10 when you were playing. And how do you think that the Pac-12 can just kind of resuscitate its image a little bit?
Well, I mean, besides the Reggie Bush era, I think when I was playing, that was kind of the golden era of the Pac-10, because you had a lot of you got which is now Hall of Famers. Now you've got, I played against Ronnie Lott and those kind of guys. Charlie White, who was at USC, Marcus Allen. I mean, the list goes on and on. Just a bunch of different players who were all pro, who went to Super Bowls, who did all that. So that was kind of like the golden era of the Pac-10 until the Reggie Bush years, and kind of when the Pete Carroll kind of came through. But then when Pete Carroll when he left, that kind of left the vacuum. USC is usually the leaderboard when it comes to getting players and being seen on TV, and it kind of brings all the rest of the conference teams together, to kind of come up, and you kind of follow in USC's footsteps, and you get TV play and all that. So I think when Pete Carroll left and USC kind of went down a little bit, everybody else kind of went down a little bit. You don't have that national exposure like you normally do when you have USC, because they're just not as good, or they're just not as attractive. So I think there was some issues there with him leaving. I think now they have the coaches, with Herm at A-State, and a few other coaches that are actually pretty good. But I think that the Southeastern Conference is, obviously pretty big with Alabama and those guys. Notre Dame has obviously kind of come through in terms of what they're doing these days. I think that they really fight for their conferences in terms of them being seen and to be attractive. And, I think that the Pac-12 or the Pac-12 now has to be a little bit more assertive in pushing, the Pac-12 in kind of the area of, hey, you know what, we deserve to be seen as well. We're just as attractive as anybody else. But I don't think that the athlete or the director who runs the Pac-12 is really kind of good at that. I think that they kind of need more of that kind of person or leadership that can put the Pac-12 into today's area of being seen on TV and to be promoted and to be, just to be recognized more.
And your senior year, first of all, you were mentioning some of the guys that you played against. Your senior year, you played in the Fiesta Bowl against Pittsburgh, against some freshman quarterback named Dan Marino. What did you know in that game? Hey, this is going to be special, or what did you think of him? Like when you were playing against him, did you realize you were watching perhaps one of the greatest NFL quarterbacks ever?
Well, I mean, at the time, Dan Marino and Pitt, when we played them, they were like the number 3 team in the country. So obviously they were good. They had Marino. They had a couple other guys who were. I mean, he had just Tony Dorsett was like a little bit before him. So when he came in, he was like kind of the next great Pittsburgh Panther, football player to kind of come through. But at the time we played them, he was a sophomore, and he'd had a good season, obviously, but and we knew that he was obviously dangerous and that he was a good player. But for some reason, I think I kind of knew maybe that this guy was going to be pretty good, because in the tunnel when we were kind of running out to the field and we were waiting to get out on the field, we were all kind of next to each other. And Dan Marino was, kind of a cocky guy. And I could just remember him just talking a whole bunch of trash to us, saying, we're gonna beat you, we're gonna do this to you guys, I'm gonna do this. It was almost like he was like a Larry Bird version where he was telling us what he was gonna do to us and all that. Fortunately, we were the little engine that could, and we actually took them into the fourth quarter. We were tied, and he drove down for the last touchdown to beat us. So I can at least say that we fought him tooth and nail, and that he didn't get what he wanted. so, so I'll go with that. Okay.
I mean, listen, it was a close game, and what's interesting, Brian, is again you did get some playing time. In fact, you played, especially your 77 year at Arizona. Now, again, Tony Mason, say what you want about him as a coach, but you had 2 touchdowns. You came in 11 games that year. What? So credit. So props to you. Props to you.
Yeah.
What were some of your fondest memories just playing football for Arizona, playing football growing up, and how often do you find yourself, if at all, reminiscing about those experiences?
Well, I don't, I guess I come from a family that we kind of move forward and look forward. And, I think it's moments like these, when I'm talking to you or some other people every once in a while, we talk about, kind of what happened in Arizona. So I don't really talk about it much, but what I will say is that, Arizona really brought me to meeting some really good friends who I'm still good friends with, and I think that to me is the most important thing, is that that those were like the best moments of my life in terms of playing at Arizona and meeting the people that I met. And, and really, I mean, I never even thought that I would even get to the point that I would be playing, because kind of where I came from, the high school that I was playing with, we weren't like the best football team in the world. So I was pretty much passed over by a lot of colleges. But, I walked on the University of Arizona, and not knowing if I was even going to make it or not. And it really helped. It had some really good people behind me to push me into to what ultimately became me being a scholarship athlete the following year, and playing a little football and enjoying myself tremendously. So I think it was great to meet a bunch of people, including your mother. And I think that she's like my little sister, or maybe my big sister. She's a little bit older than me. She'll hate that, but but meeting her and meeting a bunch of other friends of mine who I still keep in contact with, I do cherish that greatly. And to this day, it's been phenomenal.
And who are some of your favorite teammates to play? Not to put you on the spot too much.
Oh, you mean with Arizona? You mean
with Arizona? Yeah.
Arizona?
Well, you know what? Yeah, let's stick,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
stick with Arizona. We'll stick with Arizona. Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, in high school, I didn't, again, we weren't the greatest team in the world, but I have to give a quick shout out, a quick shout out to my boy Ricky Bass. He's my boy. We used to go to high school together. He was a star baseball player for the University of Hawaii, and we are still good friends today. And I'm hoping he's watching this. I'm sure he is. I told him to watch. So I'm sure he's watching. But in terms of in college, yeah, there were a few people that I was really good friends with on the football team. God, I'm trying to think of some names now. Julius Holt was a good friend of mine. Of some really good guys. Cleveland Crosby, who was a defensive end for the football team. We weren't like the greatest team in the world, but we weren't bad either. We fought tooth and nail, and I think at the time Arizona State was a really good, football team back then. They had all the all pros now, like Johnny Jefferson, who was an all pro, Hall of Famer guy, Danny White, people like that. So, they were like more of the high level team, but, we were kind of even with them. We did pretty good with them. So we weren't so bad, but yeah, there was some good football, but I think my whole thing was that I enjoyed just the college life. So it wasn't just the football players. It was also people that I kind of knew just off campus, and or off the football team, and just kind of knew them. So those are really, really memorable times.
Final 2 questions, and then I'll let you go. Uh,
You're laughing. I'm
okay.
on my God.
No, 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 no. Nothing bad like that. Nothing bad like that. First of all, I appreciate again you taking all this time. It's always great
No
to
problem.
hear this perspective, and I like giving people like yourself an opportunity to reminisce and
Yeah.
to share your story a little bit.
Mhm.
Let's focus right now on college football landscape. Who do you have as the best team?
Well, God, Alabama's the team right now. I mean, as much as I don't like them, I respect them. And at this point in time, unless it's somebody like Clemson, I just don't think Notre Dame has the horses to beat Alabama. So I think at this point, it's going to be probably Clemson that's going to be the best team, possibly Ohio State. But Alabama just has so many weapons that I just can't see them losing at this point. I just think that this whole COVID thing sort of throws everything into a tizzy too, because a lot of people, Alabama got a lot of their games in, right? And there's some other teams who have only played like 5 or 6 games or whatever. So, I think that kind of plays into the whole factor of, if anybody ever comes up against Alabama, they've only played like 4 or 5 games. And, depending on what the COVID factor is, I don't really know if they're going to have a chance to beat those guys. And I think the fact that Alabama, even they can withstand sickness of various players because their depth is so incredible that, that any team that only has maybe one or two deep and they're going to get sick or whatever, they're just not going to have a chance against those guys.
I probably agree with you. They
Yeah.
look really good. Mac Jones is probably the Heisman winner right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Easily. Yeah. I think.
I think after Florida losing to LSU, Kyle Trask, as great of a season as he's had, he's probably out of the running. Although Mac Jones's teammate Devontae Smith at the wide receiver position has been phenomenal, also. So you don't want to discount that position as well. But who's throwing it to him? Right, that's the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Pick
by
your
the
poison,
way,
right?
yeah, exactly. So I know that right now you're in film distribution and licensing, but tell us a little bit about what kinds of things you're doing now and how people can reach you and find you.
Sure. Beside on the distribution side, I am actually working on. I have a company where we're producing webisodes for the social media space, and it's sort of a new concept that I have. So I don't really want to give off too much. But I think what I will say is that it's a concept that involves storytelling, and specifically a lot with everything that's kind of going on today with regards to social justice issues, and we kind of really want to concentrate on that. But it's a whole thing of storytelling of maybe 2 to 3 minutes, and we call them webisodes, and we just kind of want to carve out a story of kind of what's going on these days in the world, whether that's the Flint, Michigan crisis, or anything else that has to do with social justice issues. We really believe that now is the time for people that are out there, especially younger generation, that they're gonna, they would follow something like that in terms of a storyline, as opposed to, commercials or these long documentaries. We feel like these short, hard hitting subject matter will be much more attractive towards the consumer that we're looking for, as opposed to the traditional type methods. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing right now. And tune in. I mean, people will kind of see soon enough kind of what me and my team are doing. So we're excited.
And then final question, I promise. Then I'll let you go.
No
What's the
problem.
most embarrassing story you've had that you're willing to share during this COVID time?
Well, I guess my Arizona friends and crew will they're gonna know this one, but basically I wouldn't say it's embarrassing, but it's when I was playing football, my nickname was Kool-Aid. And the reason why I was called Kool-Aid was because now kind of everybody kind of be patient with this whole thing. But when I tell you this, but back then, OJ Simpson, before he was the guy that we know that he is now, was a Hall of Fame running back for the Buffalo Bills. And he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And his moves were just incredible. So a lot of the guys on my team nicknamed me Kool-Aid because I was sweeter than the juice. That was his nickname, OJ Simpson. So that is, now I would say it's probably maybe a little bit embarrassing because of the things that OJ was about now as opposed to what he was, but back then that was a very big compliment. So it's, it was embarrassing and fun at the same time. So
Well, I guess what you're saying is we'll have to start calling you Kool-Aid.
yeah,
Under radar, under wraps from now on.
under wraps.
Right. When we see you on the sidewalk or something, just kind of
when you guys,
yeah, exactly.
You and your family can call me Kool-Aid, but nobody else can. So.
Well, Brian, this was fun, man. We'll have to do this again. Thank you again so much for taking some time. Always great to catch up with you, and best of luck with all your endeavors moving forward, man.
Absolutely, Jonah, man. Good luck with everything, man. And I'll be tuning in and checking you out every time.
Appreciate it.
All right,
Brian. Thank care.
Bye.
Brian Stevenson, so happy to have him join the show. Always exciting to have someone that just brings some really interesting perspective to everything and can really paint a nice picture of what that experience was like at Arizona, what his time playing was, how the position has evolved, and his thoughts on the current landscape of college football, the NFL. So super excited for that, and that he came on. That was really, really a delightful moment right there for me. Final topic of the day. It's Malkin's Moments. It's my favorite segment of the day. I recap the entire week. What was my favorite moment? And I talk about it very quickly. This one actually comes this week. My Malkin's Moment comes in women's college basketball. And Stanford's head coach, Tara Vanderveer, passes Pat Summitt for the most wins in NCAA women's basketball history, 1,099 wins over with a win over Pacific. And the reason why this is noteworthy is, listen, we have a few powerhouses in every sport at every level, right? Their teams in the NFL, the Patriots have been dominant. Basketball, the Lakers and the Celtics obviously have been dominant for long stretches of time. In men's basketball, you've had your powerhouses with the Dukes, the Kentuckys, UCLA's, North Carolinas. And in women's basketball, the three programs that you think of when you want to associate a women's basketball program with dominance and excellence is Gino Auriemma at UConn, Notre Dame, and Stanford. Those are the three programs that have embodied excellence year in and year out. And this is an incredible accomplishment for a program that has limitations as far as who they can recruit, because you have to meet certain academic requirements as well. So this is just a real shout out to Tara Vanderveer. Congrats to her. Congrats to the entire Stanford program. That is an incredible accomplishment. So that's all the time that I got for you today. Thank you so much for joining me on Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, and on YouTube every Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Thank you so much for joining me and joining J&J Media Network, making us a part of your everyday morning plans. So appreciate you tuning in. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.